I am such a huge fan of making mistakes. Like I talk about this all the time. What is so bad about being wrong? It's like, what if you're wrong? Like, what if you were okay with being wrong? There is incredible freedom. Right now, we don't have to defend ourselves. We don't have to fight. We don't have to be right.
How can decluttering not just your home, but your life lead to greater peace and focus? Welcome to this episode of Seek, Go, Create, where we're joined by Sarah Mueller, founder of the Decluttering Club. Sarah has transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands by teaching them how to let go of clutter without the overwhelm. Today, she's here to share her effective decluttering strategies and discuss how she leads and runs her successful business. Join us as we explore practical tips and inspiring insights on living a life with less stuff and more life. Sarah, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thank you so much for that intro.
Yeah, you think we could cover all that? Think we could get to that?
Totally. Absolutely.
I love the decluttering conversation. When we first met a month or so back, we talked about it. We'll get to that. Let me jump in on my first question here and get things started, either deep or light, depending on how we do. Going to give you a choice. Answer the question, what do you do? Kind of the standard icebreaker, or slightly deeper, who are you? Which one do you want to answer? And go ahead and just answer it. Pick it and go.
Well, I think I'm going to go with the first question. What do I do? That's just such a, I'm good at that question. And the answer is one of the answers is that I help women with messy homes learn how to let go. So they have time to focus on what matters most to them. Our motto is less stuff and more life, right? We're not into minimalism, although if you are, that's amazing, but that's not what we're about. We are just about helping people to let go of the burdens that sometimes they don't even know they're carrying, but they let go of the burdens and then life gets easier. And then they can do the things that they want to do, that they are called to do. But you can't do that if you are drowning in clutter, whether that's like mental clutter, physical clutter, like limiting beliefs. There's all kinds of directions we can take it. But that's what we do in a nutshell, right? We tackle the physical stuff, but also it's always intertwined with what's going on inside our heads, because we cannot declutter our physical spaces if we do not clean up our minds. So those are both very important.
That's cool. On my notes here, I wrote down mindset. We'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
But you said this is one of the answers that you give for what you do.
Mhm.
What might be another one or some of the answers that you would give for what you do?
Well, it depends on who I'm talking to, really. Sometimes I say I'm a life coach. Sometimes I say I'm a marketer, right? Because why do people do the things that they do? Why do I do the things that I do? And that is all psychology and marketing. And if I can understand that, then I can help my customers. I can help them change and solve their problems. I can solve my problems, right? So marketing and psychology and neuroscience is also a really big passion of mine. It's really intertwined in my work. Um, and what else? Business owner, right? I do that's a really strong identity for me as well. So again, kind of depends on who I'm talking to.
I like that. Now, one of the things you mentioned in the previous what you do is you said that you work with the decluttering, but you were very specific that it was for women.
Hmm.
And either tell me why, or why is it important just for women? Are you excluding men? Do men not need it? Tell me more.
Oh my gosh. It's hilarious because people get really mad at me, right? They're like, what about the men? Is this only a women's thing? And I'm like, no, 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 no. But my heart is for women. And I feel like that obviously, I mean, these are huge generalizations, right? But in general, women have different issues surrounding clutter than men do. Do we exclude men? No, we don't. We do have some men in the Decluttering Club. They are working hard. We love them. They are welcome. But I am specifically talking to women because I feel like we have been raised, we have different programming than men do in general, right? Like we're generalizing here. So that's why we talk to women. That's why I say that, because I feel like the issues are a bit different. So that's why we go there. However, everybody's welcome.
Well, I do think that there are, I mean, listen, the people that say there's no difference between men and women, I'm going, come on, really? But we do have to be careful generalizing because there are some variations. People
Mhm.
joke all the time about, oh, yeah, if you're in a household, I'm sure that the woman does the laundry and the woman does the dishes.
Mhm.
No, I do all of that in our household. So,
Mhm.
and my wife would tell you this is kind of an interesting kind of get started to a more deeper conversation about clutter. I am much more the neater, tidier, everything has a place.
Mhm.
I love to get rid of stuff. We live in an RV, come on. My wife accumulates a little bit more than I do. And so there are some
Mhm.
differences and all.
Of course. Of course, right? I mean, there's some women who are incredibly neat and tidy, and they are orderly, and they don't need me. There's some men that are neat and tidy. It just like I am talking to the subset of people who fit kind of that demographic. But
Right.
you never know where we end up. You never know
Sure.
because I think you may have a decluttered house, but your mind is a mess, right? And you're really struggling there. So we do have some different topics that we do cover beyond just the kind of the initial decluttering your stuff type of
But
thing.
before we kind of dive in and maybe start really doing some things with the decluttering, what would you say is your superpower? You mentioned a couple things earlier. Obviously, you've got a club that's decluttering.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we discussed. You're good at it, but you also just mentioned the marketing and all that.
Mhm.
You actually spoke with a little bit of a different tone when you talked about that.
Mm, mhm.
But what is your superpower? What is that thing that you were really created for?
Oh, I love that question. I think my superpower is listening to people without judgment, right? And so I think it's two things, and they're both super important. I can listen to people. People tell me their life stories all the time, right? So I can listen without judgment. I'm able to explain things in new ways to people. If you come with a problem, you think, well, this is just the problem. But if we can restate the problem, if I can explain a problem to you in a different way, then it's going to uncover a solution to you. So I think that those two things have really allowed me to reach people and help them in a unique way because I can give them steps, I can give them solutions that they can take action on and they don't feel judged. So I think it's those two things hand in hand.
I think that word without judgment, the two words, I guess, I think it's so important, especially with your community. I think we talked about this the first time we met. I was intrigued, super intrigued. That's one of the reasons we continue to talk because I just am so
Yeah.
intrigued with all that you're doing. And being someone who is like super into not minimalism, but I don't like accumulating stuff and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I could see how if I were trying to run that group, I'd be judging. I
Uh,
would be.
uh,
So I admire, I mean, it's because I'm guessing you probably don't have much of a life of clutter, do you?
I used to though.
Okay.
So I can relate. Yeah, I can relate. It's like to be overwhelmed, right? And I mean, I still get human beings get overwhelmed, right? So that's not unique to clutter, but yeah, I can relate. And also, again, one of the things that we teach in the decluttering club is that you're not your stuff. So maybe you do have a kitchen that, has seen better days, right? And, could use some work. I understand that doesn't mean that you are a horrible person. It doesn't mean you're a failure as a person, as a wife, as a mother, as a parent, whatever, right? Like it doesn't. And I think that gets a little bit back to, seeing things differently because I know, oh, this isn't your failure. This is because of your ADHD or your perfectionism or your overwhelm, right? So it's a completely different cause. Like people attribute their struggles to the wrong things. And if you don't have the attribution right, then you're not going to be able to solve the problem. So I think that's kind of a nice way to look at it, right? I'm like, "Oh, I don't need to judge you because I know that this isn't about you." I mean, it is and it isn't. Now, it doesn't mean that I would wanna live in that house, probably not, but I don't need to. Like, I can help someone, I can hold space for them without judging them, and also have different standards for myself, right? And I
Mm.
think that's really important.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I convinced my wife of at one point in our lives was that the problem is drawers. That if we didn't have any drawers, we would be able to not accumulate and have clutter. I'm sure you know how that worked out. It worked out. We actually
That's awesome.
we were in an apartment, we were at Bible school, we were up in the mountains of Colorado. We were there for 3 years, and we never had any drawers in our bedroom. We
No
only
draw.
had the fixed drawers that were in the kitchen.
Yeah, for you then? Did that solve did that
Sarah, here's the deal. Maybe it eliminated clutter. Was it good for my relationship with my beautiful bride of 30 something years? I'm not so sure. It might have been like I won the battle but lost the bigger
less the
war or
war?
something.
Mhm.
Well, one of the things that people have heard this, and I think I shared this with you, we were at one point in a big old home, bunch of stuff, lost all of that, traveled
Mhm.
around with just basically almost a backpack and a duffel bag, went to
Uh,
Australia, New Zealand. And one of the things we did learn, this is kind of interesting. You think your stuff is so important, but there's stuff
mm,
everywhere.
mhm,
We were never at a loss for clothing,
mhm.
for furniture when we moved in places, or I mean, there was stuff. There's stuff everywhere all over this world, right?
Absolutely, I love that. That's so true, and we forget. We're like, "Oh, no, I'm not gonna have anything to wear." Like, that's literally what our brains say when it's the most ridiculous thing, right? Like, nobody's walking around naked, so I don't think that's actually gonna happen, but yet we're worried about it.
I know. I remember one quick story, then I wanna define clutter. We're about to define what clutter is. We were
Mhm.
flying from Australia to New Zealand. It was warm in Australia, it was gonna be cold in New Zealand. I didn't have a coat, my wife had sort of a coat. I was talking to the gal on the airplane, I said, where's y'all have like a Walmart-ish or something like that I could go in New Zealand?" He goes, there's some places." I said, "I really need to get a coat," and he just looked
Mhm.
over at me, he says, "I got one for you." And I knew where he was. He had already said where he was in New Zealand. I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Yeah, we'll be there within a month or so. Maybe we can stop in, have
Uh-huh.
dinner." He goes, "No." He goes, "I've got the coat now for you." I said, "Where is it?" And he pointed to the bin up above in the airplane. And we got up off the plane and he handed me a flight jacket that his son had just given him. So I'm walking around with the Navy or something flight jacket. People kept thinking I was in like the Air Force.
It's
Kind
ama
of goes to my
uh
point that I believe stuff's out there for us.
when you needed it.
It did. It absolutely did. And we were,
Mhm.
listen, from a financial standpoint, we were less than broke at the time. So it was a real blessing in so many ways.
That
But
is so cool.
let's define what is clutter
Mm.
because I think it might mean some different things to different people.
Mm. Oh, I love this. Absolutely, right? Like, I think you say clutter and people immediately feel judged. I imagine this happens for you. If you tell people you got rid of everything and you live in an RV, they think, "Oh, you don't wanna see my house." They automatically feel judged, but, my definition of clutter is just anything that is in your possession that isn't serving you. Right, that's it.
Mm,
So if you love all that stuff in those drawers, right, and you know what's in there, right, that's the caveat. You can't just be like, "I love all my stuff," because you probably don't know what you have unless you've taken a look, right? But if you are on board with keeping it, then it's actually not clutter, like, in as far as I'm concerned. But anything that is in your possession that isn't serving you, right, and you get to decide what's serving you. It could be serving you because, it's a special memory, or you're keeping it for like quote unquote insurance purposes. You might need it, right? Like if you truly believe that, then it's actually not clutter, right? But those things that you're keeping because you're afraid to let them go, or you haven't looked in the box and you moved it 10 years ago, and all of that, that is clutter. It's in your way. You keep cursing it when you trip over it. That's clutter.
my wife hates when I tell the story of helping her mother move. Multiple times we helped her move, and I moved boxes that had garage sale on them so
Mm-hmm.
many times. They were a box that had garage sales, but we moved them
Mm-hmm.
and moved them and moved
Mm-hmm.
them. What are I think it's important because there is the physical of this. I mean, it's just the walking into a room or a place, a space and going, there's a lot here.
Mhm,
But that's relative though. I mean, for some people it
mhm,
might be okay to have a lot there and some people may not may not want drawers.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but what talk about, I don't know if the emotional is what we should talk about first or the mindset,
mhm,
because I really do. And I have, this is kind of tough for me, and I'm almost looking for you to educate me a little bit because I'm fairly harsh in this
mhm,
area and maybe judgy. And so
mhm.
I would love to understand more of the emotion and the mindset that people go through that are going through this process.
That people that are holding on to things that aren't serving
Yes.
them? Is that what you're
Yes.
thinking?
Or they've
Yes.
accumulated
Uh-huh.
them
Mhm,
and now they're going, okay, there's an issue that needs to be
mhm.
dealt with.
Yeah. I think it really most of it, not all of it, but a big component is just fear. It's fear. It's fear that I might need it. It is fear that I'm gonna miss it. It's fear that, this belonged to somebody and they're gone. This is all I have left from them, and I just can't bear to let that go. Even though I don't look at it and I can't find it and, I have it, like it's just all fear. There's other reasons too, right? Like, so some people may have grown up not having enough, or their parents or grandparents were in the depression. So they were taught, we don't waste stuff. Like, we keep this stuff. We want to be prepared. And so they are living in, they're acting like it's 1945 or 29, but they live in 2025 where we can order with one click and things are kind of cheap, right? Clothing is like fast fashion, like you can get whatever you want. So these two things create this perfect storm of a lot of stuff, which does is not conducive. So those are kind of some of the things that are going on. Those are like the main issues, right? And then you add in, let's say, overwhelm, you add in anxiety, which I believe is at an all-time high right now. You add in ADHD. So people want to clean up, right? They want to let go of stuff, but they have no idea where to start, and then they're kind of frozen. They're like, I don't want to do this right, and they get distracted, and the clutter is distracting, so it's like it gets compounded. So that is a factor too. And so all of these things together kind of make it really hard for someone to reverse the trend. And with clutter, I believe that you're either actively maintaining and decluttering, or or you're not. And if you are not, then you are accumulating, right? Which is only going to, make things look worse.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was about to ask. It was a theory that I have that most of our society, culture, first world, especially marketing and all the
Mm,
business, they are pressing accumulation on us.
mhm,
And
mhm. Yeah, of
so
course.
doing nothing or just staying static is probably not an option
Right.
because if you're not working at pushing back some of that
Mhm,
accumulation, it is going to
mhm.
begin accumulating. Have you, so you could address that, but I also want to ask, have you ever looked at the history of this? Is this a newer thing like the last 100, 150 years? Has it been
Mhm.
around, 2,000 years since Jesus was here? Did the
Yeah.
nation of Israel, they carried a bunch of stuff out of Egypt? Maybe they you know what I mean? What
Right.
is this a
The
new
history of
thing?
clutter.
Is this a
I
modern
Mhm.
culture thing?
Yeah, so I this is just my opinion, but I do believe this is probably the last 120
Mm.
years, right? Because 100 years ago, 150 years ago, people would have just a handful of outfits of clothing, right? Clothing was expensive, really expensive that much, that many years ago. And now things have, technology makes things cheaper, right? TVs, computers, whatever, like things. And I'm not saying that our budgets aren't stretched, because that's not what's going on here. But in general, the the item of the outfit of clothing that you buy today can cost a lot, like a fraction of what it would cost 100 years ago. So I do believe that it's more of a modern phenomenon. Um, there is an element of like as humans, we are programmed to save for a rainy day, right? That makes sense, right? You don't if you don't know when you're going to be able to go hunting and or is your harvest going to come in, you need to save some stuff up, right? We need that there's that little bit of hoarding instinct that is survival, right? So that's just innate, but I believe that just our current society has just exacerbated that tendency and made it so that it just became, extreme, right? So
Hmm.
I do believe it's become a lot more of a problem in the last probably 30, 40 years than it has been in the past.
I think primarily I was glancing at your website here.
Mhm.
Primarily, you are talking about stuff,
Mhm.
but clutter also involves other things. I think I saw a note about that somewhere. It's time, it's
Mhm.
life, it's other things. Talk about the
Mhm.
things that are not
Mm.
stuff that can get cluttered.
Yeah, well, it's like if you have a cluttered home, you may have a hard time saying no, right? Like, so people wanna give you their things, right? They are like, "Oh, I don't need this, you should take it," right? Well, "Oh, well, I don't know." Like, we feel like we can't say no to these things because it would be rude, right? Someone wants to give you something, you have to say yes, right? So, there's kind of that aspect of people pleasing that comes in, and then also, like just good things come your way. So whether that's opportunities or volunteer, experiences or new hobbies, so time commitments. So we do find that people have just a lot. They pack in their calendar, right? They're going to pack in their garage. They're also going to pack in their calendar and just have so much going on, and then wonder why they're feeling so stressed, right? I think sometimes actually we do it. We're going to pack in our spaces and or our time or what's going on inside our heads because we don't want to think like we don't want to stop and think about what's actually going on, right? Like if you actually cleared out your calendar and had a free day, then you might have to face yourself and you might not like what you see. Hey, you might realize that, you want to make some changes in your life and you're not happy. So a lot of these things, the physical clutter and then also the I don't know, theoretical clutter, the invisible clutter, it's a distraction from what's really going on in your life. Um,
Mm.
and, I understand why some people don't want to face it because it could be painful, you know?
Well, and there's no doubt we have a very distracted society. I can't pick
Mhm.
my phone up here because it's my camera, but we have so much coming at us.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
guess one thing I'm curious, your observation, I guess, with people in the club, and I don't know if you have a gauge for this or not, but is it one of these things where if people are cluttered in one area, they are often cluttered in many areas? Or is it very segmented? It's like, you know what? I got a hobby room that's just
Mhm.
a mess, but
Mhm.
everything else I'm fairly orderly. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but I
Mhm.
guess one of the things I think about is time. I've been working very diligently over the last handful of years just to keep my calendar
Mhm.
very open.
Yeah.
Typically we're recording on a Friday, which is very unique for me. Usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's the only time I do
Mhm.
scheduled stuff.
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
and it's usually just in the afternoons or mid-morning to afternoon. So what do you see people that
Mm.
are cluttered in a lot of areas, or is it more segmented?
I think it's actually a combination. I think there are some people and we have, one of our coaches, she jokes that, her house was like, if you came over to her house, even before she started decluttering, you'd think, "Oh, she's got it all together. She's super organized." But she always said, "Well, don't open a closet. Don't open, behind closed doors." It was a different story. So things were packed in. So we do have some people like that, right? They keep up their standards in, maybe in their public areas of their home, but then, don't go upstairs or don't go in the basement, don't open the doors, don't look at my calendar, right? So we have some of that. Um, and then we have people that are, it just kind of spills over and so like it's like a ripple effect. So, first the kitchen gets messy and then they're like, well, the kitchen is a mess. And then they start not keeping up with the laundry and and so on and so on. So we do have a mix. I guess I would probably say that we have more people in that second bucket that struggle with a number of areas. And maybe they're great at work, right? They're like work gives them structure, right? Because, they need to be there on time. They've got, they have a boss to report to. So it's easier to fit in that environment, whereas at home, you make it up, you create the structure, and that's really challenging. That's one of the things that we give people is here's how you can create your own structure, because then you can operate more easily within that. And, it's not just like figuring out every day, you have to start over, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's kind of what's going on there.
I think what we'll do is we'll come back towards the tail end of the conversation and try to give some tips and
Mhm.
some specific things that people might do that are kind of facing some clutter in their lives. But I would really, I love business journeys. I love talking about the journeys that people have been on, and I guess even before we get to the decluttering club, which I think has had a few iterations, if I remember
Mhm.
our conversation. What were you trained for? Did you do college? Just give me some of, Sarah, the early years, whatever you think might be cool to
Sure.
share.
Yeah, gladly. Yeah, so this is my 3rd business. I had a corporate job, so I went to University of Pennsylvania, got a degree, undergrad with the Wharton School, so I have a business degree, right? And then I had a corporate job for 6 years, but then my oldest son was born, so I thought, like, this commute is for the birds. I don't really like this anymore, so I left that job and, went out as on my own as an IT consultant, right? So I did that for a few years. And then decided, this internet seems like a pretty cool thing. Um, maybe I should start my own internet business. And so I actually started an import business for German books, right? Because my now ex-husband and I were speaking German with our kids, and I'm a book lover, so it's like we need books for these kids. And so we did that. I ran that for, I guess, probably 12 years, right? That was an online business. We had books. We had a bookstore in the basement. I would ship them out. And I learned so much. I learned how to build websites. I learned like my first real taste of marketing and fulfillment and customer service, and learn how to create my own structure, right, from that business. And I sold that business, needed something to do because at that point I had 4 kids, and I was homeschooling the kids, but I kind of have a lot of energy. So I thought, let's start a blog because I like to give advice, right? I like to tell people how to do stuff. I think I have answers, and the people that my friends at the time weren't really interested in my advice. Have you ever noticed that, like, your friends are like, "Yeah, that's great. Like, I didn't ask you." Right? So
Family's usually not interested either. It's usually
right.
strangers
Is it
are more interested than people that are
exactly.
in your circle.
Right. Yeah, so when you get people who say, "Oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. I did what you said and it worked," that's, like, the best feeling ever. So that is what has now turned into the Decluttering Club, right? And that started,
Mm.
I guess about 8 years ago, I started that business. And, it's just grown and evolved and morphed, into, where we are now with just an absolutely thriving community.
So, I'd love to know what was the time frames of the book business online? I'm sitting here thinking
Mhm.
Amazon.
Right.
Sarah could have been Bezos, she could have,
My
but,
vision was not quite as big as Jeff Bezos. Thank
what was the time frame of that? Of that business, the book business?
Yeah, that was, 2003 to 2012. Yeah.
Okay, so right after the dot-com bubble had burst and people were picking up the pieces and
Mhm.
things like that. Are you a are
Mhm.
you a tech person? Would you be pretty proficient at you mentioned websites and things like that? Because a lot of people get intimidated by that with
Mhm.
these type businesses, but you seem
Yeah.
doesn't bother you one bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of a hack, right? Like I can find my way around. I actually think that is not always a good thing. Like if you can do some of these things, then you may be reluctant to hire help and maybe you're not quite as good as someone else would be, right? But it does help when I'm hiring someone or when I need to do something, I'm like, I understand how this works. So I definitely have kind of that mentality, that mindset. I'm not at all trained in tech, but I can kind of find my way around.
I bet you're like my wife, Glory, you figure things out.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
if you've
And
got
there's
something, you figure it out.
tools. There are so many like, it is stupid easy to use the tools we have today. I mean, I was writing HTML in 2003. So you cannot tell me that the technology is hard. It's not. I mean, there's always things to work out, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. You know, I heard this quote. I don't remember who said this, but if it were easy, you would have done it by now. Like all the things that are worth doing are just not easy, and whether that's decluttering or building a business, you gotta be up for that.
Right. Now when we talked, we talked a little bit of details of your business, and I don't want us to go into that. However, there could be some people that are hearing decluttering club and think, oh, it's a nice little side business, side hustle type deal.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it is not. This is a very nice size business.
Mhm.
What are you willing to share maybe about the size and scope of it at this
Mm.
stage? What are you comfortable sharing? Because it's
Yeah,
impressive.
thank you, thank you. Now it's, yeah, people are shocked actually that I make any money, It's
Yeah, it's
hilarious
like,
because
oh,
they're
it's a
like,
little
"Wait,
club.
you teach people how to clean up the kitchen?" And I tell my kids this. I'm like, "Listen, you guys get this for free. People pay me for this, you should be grateful," and they roll their eyes, but, um, no, I mean, we serve we have thousands of like, I guess maybe you can do the math, right? We serve thousands of members, at, different price points between $37 a month and up. So, you do the math there. We're doing very well. We have a long ways to go, right? I have some really big goals, but it is like I'm taking this seriously, right? This is not just a little thing. Like we have all kinds of things in place. One of the things one of my coaches mentioned recently was that whenever we run a call and we have multiple calls for our members, we have two people on that call. Like there's so much that goes into just running an everyday, run of the mill call. It costs us like hundreds of dollars just to put on one call, and we do numerous calls every single month. We have a whole team. We've got lawyers, we've got trademarks, we've got payroll. There's a lot going on, and I think it's important. This is a really important message. People keep coming to me and they say things like, "Oh gosh, it's so cool that you have such a unique business." Like, they think that this is like me, I don't know, like teaching people how to train hamsters or something, and I'm like, "No, like everybody needs this." And like, let's say 10% of the country is desperate for this knowledge, like literally, like that is who I am talking to. This is not a little like thing that is a nice to have. No, this is ruining people's lives like on a tremendous scale. So that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, the thing that was just so impressive too, we were sitting around a table, we were chatting when we first met, and I think all of us had, just kind of met each other, and
Yeah.
not that anybody we're none it wasn't the type of room where people were sizing people up, but you're
Mhm.
kinda curious about other people's business, we're there to learn and hopefully help and different things like that, and I remember when it got to your turn, I was like, I was literally blown away. We were talking about memberships and things like that.
Mhm.
So it was, yes. I mean, if anybody can do that math, they can come up with some very, very impressive numbers. I'm
Mhm.
curious. You said you went to what many would consider one of the top business schools in the country.
Mhm.
How much of what you were trained on there would you say you're using and applying in this business, what,
Mm,
15, I'm trying to do the math here, 15 years later, 20 years later, or something like that?
let's try 30.
Well, I was trying to be polite. I was trying.
No, I'm 51, like, I'm proud of it, like, I have no problem.
Good.
Like, honestly, I really don't. But I love that question because I'm sure there are things, right? Like, I did really enjoy my time in college, but, I mean, first of all, my business and internet businesses, they just didn't exist, like, there was no internet, so they couldn't have taught that. I probably learned a lot of things in terms of like accounting fundamentals for sure,
Mhm.
management, right? So some solid business fundamentals came through that. I didn't really take that many marketing courses. I have spent the last 30 years educating myself, like one thing after another. So I would say that the majority of what I use, like my skills now, is all on the job for sure. I'm sure that's it's not 100%, but I just you can't compare to learning on the job. Like this is when you get creative. This is when you you have to figure things out. There's no angry customers. There's no unhappy customers or broken tech in a college course. It just doesn't. You can't create that. So.
So then what are you advising your children to do? I'm just
Mm.
curious about
Yeah.
this because, say, I think you've got them
Mm.
in probably these ages where they're maybe
Yeah.
starting their lives and all that, and
Mhm.
I know you've got multiple kids, so you don't have to go through each one, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious 'cause I look around at times, and I used to be I'm very optimistic, but I'll look around and go, "You know what? I don't know that I really know what to tell people to do right
Yeah.
now." What are you telling your kids?
Well, so I have one kid who's gonna be an engineer, so he's in college, that makes perfect sense for him. I have one kid who's in computer science, and then I have 2 that are, one's in 8th grade and one's just graduating, and I mean, I have told them that they don't have to go to college if they don't want to. They do not believe me. They're like, "It's easy for you to say that. You have an Ivy League degree, mom," and so they just really don't believe me, but, um, I sort of feel like it's all just gonna work out, like, I'm just not worried about it, like, really. I mean, I'm gonna try and guide them. I'm gonna try and expose them to things that I think would be useful. I've taken all of my kids on business trips now because I want them to meet other entrepreneurs. I want them to see, like the world is a really big place. People are doing some crazy stuff. Like there are some amazing, amazing businesses out there. They see me doing my work. So I think that's kind of my goal is to just expose them to as many ideas as I can and to the world and to travel and to try to make sure that they don't just kind of pigeonhole themselves into thinking this is the what everybody does. You just go to college and then you go and get a job and you're there for 40 years. Like maybe, but not necessarily. Right. Like I want them to know that they have options and I want them to be resourceful and how that works out for them is really gonna be up to them, and I'm just gonna try and be available to them.
What's interesting is, it just came to mind that we will often clutter our lives with education that's may not be needed, or we think we're supposed to go to this school because mama wants
Mhm.
me to go to this
Yeah.
school. I agree. If someone's gonna be an engineer, they need to go to engineering school. I went to Georgia Tech. I'm an
Mhm.
engineer. I don't
Yeah.
do a lot of engineering, but, I've got clients that are engineering companies, and yeah, you need that engineering degree, work towards getting your PE, all that kinda stuff.
Yeah. Mhm.
But, I've come to realize that one of the struggles I still deal with, and my wife does also, is information. We actually
Mm.
gather too much information, and I actually think education can be similar, that people just
Mhm.
feel like they need all of this, and you know what?
Mm.
At some
Mhm.
point, you need to sit down. This is a transition right here. I'm gonna project it. You need to just sit down and start writing a blog,
Uh-huh.
which it
Yeah.
sorta sounds like that's what you did.
Mm.
And so the question I have is how intentional or purposeful or what was around this time frame when you
Mm.
said, "I'm gonna start writing a blog, and it's eventually going to be an extremely successful membership model business,"
Mhm.
or, "I just have some info, and I just wanna type it out and get it out to the world."
Yeah, it was really just one thing leading to the next. I could never have imagined what, what like I did want to have a successful business, right? Like I was following some different influencers, probably 10 years ago. So I kind of wanted to be a quote unquote success, but there is no way I could have predicted that it would look like this. Right. And I think if I had known, I would have been like, I'm out. This is too hard. Like, no, we're like this, like, no. But so it was really just like one step at a time, right? Like, okay, I'm going to share some ideas. Oh, this is kind of cool, and then maybe I learned, oh, you should start an email list because that's a great way to communicate with people. I was like, oh, that sounds good to me. I'll do that. Right. And then built that. And so, really, one thing led to another. And I think that's been like when I do things that way, it is the most effective. I think sometimes, like I love thinking big, and I think I'm not thinking big enough. But sometimes thinking big can be paralyzing, you know? So I think you have to be careful. And like you said, if you're just consuming, and anything, whether it's food or information, education, like that's not going to get you anywhere. It feels productive. It feels great. Oh, I got, I know how to do these things, but you don't like that doesn't count for anything until you've actually gone out and done it. Right? So I am a huge fan of let's just try stuff. Let's launch it in a weekend. Like, what's the simplest way to do things? I think people sit around for way too long, instead of just trying things out, right? Because we're just kind of afraid of rejection, right? That's why people don't do things is because they think they're going to fail, and they might, but then they learn something, and then they can try again, right? If you could fail 10 times in the space of time that someone else is learning, you are a million million steps ahead. And that's okay, right? That is literally how you build a business is by figuring out what doesn't work.
I think a lot of people also, when they start doing something like that, they're attempting to monetize as quickly as possible because, they need to put food on the table or something
Hmm.
like that. Was there
Yeah.
any of that for you? Did you have other income streams?
Hmm.
What did you feel pressure to make it work and make it work quick, or were you able to be patient? Anyway, there's a lot of things there, but a lot of it might
Yeah.
come down to how quickly did you feel pressure to
Mm.
monetize?
Well, so I was probably making maybe $30,000 when I got divorced. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, so either this needs to start producing some money or I just need to go get a job. Right. Like, and I was like, that's cool. I could do that. I can go get a job. Like, that was never just gonna be, like, a disaster for me. I didn't want to, right? But I was like, "If this doesn't work, no big deal, right? It's cool. I will go work at Starbucks, and then I'll figure out my life." Um, so there was definitely some pressure, right? But it's not like I had to go make $1,000,000 the first year. I think sometimes people just they compare themselves. They're like, "Ooh," they look at they go, "Oh, Tony Robbins is doing this, so I should do that too." No, you shouldn't. Like he is you can't compare where you are to where someone else is that has been doing this for that much longer. Like you're not going to do the same things like at all. So I think that it is important to give yourself time to figure things out, and if that's 6 months, if that's a year, if that's 3 months, like maybe you can get by with, $1,000 or $2,000. It's not hard to make $2,000, right? Making $100,000 in your first year, that might be like way out of reach. But if you're like, okay, how can I make a couple thousand bucks? It's not hard to do.
Hmm. At what point did you look at it and go, I think we've got something here. This actually is, we're getting some
Mm,
traction. We've got some people that are
yeah.
joining us. When do you said 8 years is kind of when you
Mhm.
started. At what
Yeah.
point did you go, this is working?
I mean, it's hilarious because I was probably making a lot of money way before I had that thought. In fact, I got coached on this, I think it was 3 years ago. Because I wasn't hitting my goals, right? And I wasn't willing to see the success that we were having. So, our customers were happy, things were working well, And I was still thinking, it's just not working the way I want it to work. And I got coached on that. And it turns out I realized, oh, it's absolutely working. Right? It was kind of hilarious because it just really flipped my thinking. And I thought, oh, everything, like, is it neat and tidy? Is it all wrapped up in a bow? Like, no, not at all. But like everything is going well. Customers are happy. We're making money. We're profitable. Like those are all really important things. So I would say probably 3 years ago was when I started to feel that way,
So it was a
which
five
is,
it was a 5-year
yeah,
process before you said,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
doing something. One of the
yeah,
things,
and I
Sarah, is
probably I could have thought that 2 or 3 years before then, but I just didn't see it that way, I was, like, real critical, like, we all have I'm sure you do too, have high standards, right? And we're just not happy, we're never but that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to not notice your success.
well, it is, but that really did boy, you're setting me up for my next question. This is
Mm.
gonna be a home run, I think. As I've been
Okay.
sitting here talking to you, and we've talked a couple other times, I notice how comfortable you are or you appear to be in being you.
Mm,
And,
mhm,
and I'm curious to what number 1, do you agree
mhm,
with that observation? And number 2, to what do you attribute that to?
mm. I agree. I totally agree. I think it wasn't always this way. I
Mm.
had a lot of opportunities even like what 5 or 6 years ago? Was it 2019? I was one of a small number of people that was flown to the Facebook Community Summit. Like Facebook had this huge event, and I was actually one of like 10 people that was honored. They had picked us to to test out some new features, and I was had all this press, and I was still like I can't, like, stop looking at me, like, don't like, I don't know what to do with this. This is very uncomfortable, but I think over time, I've just, like, started to accept that, like, this is who I am, and I do have a big mission, so, um, I think over time, it has gotten easier. What was the question? Is that me? What was the second question? I lost the train
Why
of thought. Oh, what do I
what do
attribute?
you attribute it to? Just
Oh,
being
yeah.
comfortable? I mean, I don't you don't seem like you're
Yeah.
striving, you don't seem like you're
Mhm,
and that is in no way saying there's not stuff going on, okay? I am
mhm,
not in any way saying everything's perfect in your life. What I'm saying is you just
mhm.
seem this is a spiritual term for me, you seem at peace and you seem
Oh,
at
yeah.
rest. You've got stuff going on, but you're and I
Mhm.
was just wondering what you might attribute
Mm.
that to. Is there any practices? Is there anything that you do? Are you aware of it? Anyway,
Yeah, well, I have done so much work on myself, on mindset, and, I mean, maybe it gets a little bit back to what I said about my kids. I'm like, everything is gonna work out fine. Like, I'm just not worried about, like, a lot of things anymore. And I think that just lets me show up, like, with truth and honesty about who I am, about what's going on, about what I can do, about what's going on in the world. It lets me again be non-judgmental. So I think there's that. I just think that we worry so needlessly, like there's just so much worrying going on in the world and worry is a natural human emotion, you know? But I think if you just have faith, like, we're just specks floating on a ball of rock, you know? If you have faith, then, like, what's there to worry about, God has it all sorted out, like, why am I worried? It's kinda comical, when you think about it. So, I think
it
I've done all of that work,
that's
a lot
good,
of that.
and it's so interesting how when I get a question that pop in my mind, and then you'll answer it before I actually get to the question, because I was about to ask, I
Mhm.
sometimes define faith at its root as believing that everything's gonna be okay,
Mhm.
and then you went there, so that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
any
Even if it's
it
not okay. Like, sometimes it's not okay, and it's still okay.
It's still okay,
Mhm.
especially when we look at time frames.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, some things are short term. Like, when we got on the call here, I said, you know what? I'm dealing with some of this crud. I'm going to
Yeah.
power through. My eyes are glassy. My voice sounds a little bit blah. But, and my wife and I are real important when we do this. We don't make decisions while we're not feeling well or we're
Mhm.
fatigued because we know it'll pass. I mean, and we were talking this morning, how long
Mhm.
have we been sick? She goes, it's only been a couple days. I'm going, good gosh, it seems like it's been a long
Right.
time, but
In months. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything
Absolutely.
else? Anything else you want to share about your business
Mm.
to maybe people that might be listening in that might be business owners or anything before I finish up with a few questions about specifically decluttering?
Yeah, I think people are just so reluctant to try things. I think that's one of the things that I do really well, and I always have. Like, what's the worst that can people are like, "Oh," I remember I coached someone at one point, and they were like, "I'm just really worried about, like, starting my Facebook group." And I was like, "Dude, no one is listening. You're fine. Like, I promise you, no one is even noticing. So just do your thing, figure it out, start with one person." Like, we just we just put all this pressure on ourselves to be perfect and to do it right, and nobody's watching at the beginning, and then when they are watching, like, I mean, I am such a huge fan of making mistakes. Like, I talk about this all the time. Maybe this is the thing. Okay. Like, what is so bad about being wrong? It's like, what if you're wrong? Like, what if you were okay with being wrong? There is incredible freedom. Incredible freedom. Right? Now we don't have to defend ourselves, we don't have to fight, we don't have to be right. It doesn't mean we don't wanna be right. Of course we wanna be right. Of course we wanna do things well, like, of course I do. But also just, like, be okay if you screw up, right? If you're not afraid of screwing up, making a mistake, making someone unhappy, then you're gonna do a million times more than someone who is, like, trying to do it all right. Like, it's impossible. So just, like, be willing to screw up and make mistakes, and this is probably a message that I need to remember because, I struggle with it too, but, I think there's so much freedom in, like, being okay with being wrong. Why not?
Yeah, I think that's good. It goes back to what we talked about faith. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And I've had some
yeah.
conversations on recent podcasts about the word risk and how
Mhm,
we have become a society, a culture that we can't really evaluate risk well. And I
mm,
mean,
mm,
one of the things, and I'm sure you probably are able to think about this, is like, what's the worst thing that can happen?
mhm.
What is the
Yeah,
worst thing that can happen if you write a few blog posts
mhm.
and what's the
Yeah,
worst thing that can happen? You know what?
right. You get your
Is
feelings
anyone gonna
hurt, maybe someone laughs at you, the internet trolls show up and I'm always like, "Well, they're just bots." Like, they're not even real people. Like, that's always my thought. Some people are afraid of going viral, and I'm like, "Why? That's hilarious," Like, these people, it's just all engagement. I mean, there's so much I could say there. Um, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? People yell at you? Like, okay, you're not dead. Like, and if you are,
and
then you're not gonna care anyway, so
that's
I don't
right.
know.
I mean, so I don't think anyone's lost, limbs or
Yeah.
their life or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just come on.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are when someone comes into the decluttering club,
Mhm,
and what I'd love to do is maybe walk through how they come in
mhm,
and what are some things they could expect early on, and we can talk about where they need to go to find all that. What
mhm.
what are some things they could expect when they come into the club?
Yeah, so the first thing that we teach everybody, our very first lesson is what we call kitchen zero, right? Because the kitchen is, where you spend most of your time, a lot of your time, and any work that you're going to do in your kitchen is going to pay off, right? It's going to have this ripple effect. So we teach our members how to do what we call kitchen zero, which really just means like, what is the one or what are the one or two things that you're willing to do in your kitchen every day? Right, and that is the emphasis every day, right? And everybody comes back and they're like, "Oh, there's 20 things that I have to do." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. You you won't do those every day, right? I need you to tell me 1 or 2 things." So So we teach them how to do that, and then they do it every day, and we coach them through that, and then over time, they literally basically have a brand new kitchen because they start taking care of it regularly, and then, it's just awesome. So that's the first thing that we do, but we're really big on, on what we call baby steps and, on working 10 minutes at a time because, again, if you're showing up and you're overwhelmed, you have a lot of work to do, you think you need to clear your schedule for the next, 3 months and just, like, torture yourself by getting the shovel in the dumpster, and nobody wants to do that. That's nobody is signing up for that. So we really work hard on convincing people 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes today, 10 minutes tomorrow, 10 minutes later, right? It will add up over time. And that helps to people to overcome their perfectionism, their ADHD, their overwhelm, right? So those are kind of the two like really introductory types of things we do. We have a really strong community. We match people up with buddies, so they feel like they're not alone, right? They feel, oh, other people have these problems, right? We can talk about them. It's okay to be real, right? Like we're all about real talk. We celebrate the wins, but we're also there, someone loses a husband, loses a child, loses their job, they're sick, whatever. We're there for that, like that's a really important thing. And so that's what we are all about. And I think people realize it. And so it's real powerful.
You at the beginning, you talked about how you don't really judge people.
Mhm.
I think the community seems like it's adopted that. It seems like a safe space. Would that be accurate?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
So where
Yeah.
can people find it? Tell people I've got it pulled up here, but go ahead and you tell them. We'll,
Mhm.
we'll include all that in the notes. And I've got one more question that'll be a
Okay.
nice one we
Yeah.
could wrap up with.
Yeah, so you can find us on social. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. The handle is the Decluttering Club. You can just search us up, or you can go to our blog, our website, thedeclutteringclub.com. We do have a free training that you can sign up for some free decluttering challenges. 10 minutes is all you need. It's a really great way to get started. But social is really my jam. It's all me on social media, at least right now. And I love it. It's just so much fun for me. So that is where I hang out.
That actually calls me to think of another question to ask that I wasn't going to ask. How do you keep social media from cluttering up your life? Is that
Um,
a hard I said,
it's
because
tough.
social media clutters a lot of our lives.
It really does. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do not let my phone ding. My phone does not call the shots. I think
So
that is really, really
no
important.
notifications. I don't have any
It's
notifications
except
either.
for like, text. But yeah, no notifications. I turn up all those badges, right? So like none of that happens because I do not want my phone to dictate when I look at it. Um, but I don't know. I think if some great stuff going on in your life, then social media is not as much of a pull. Right now, I think I would appreciate like using social media less than I do. And it's like, oh, it's for business, right? So it's kind of a convenient excuse, but um, at some point you kind of get over it. It's boring over time. Like it kind of loses its thrill. And I've done a lot of research and a lot of work on dopamine and kind of the effect that has. So I'm very aware of it, and I don't want it to have that impact on me. Um, so I think that's kind of it. Like there was a time when I was going viral a lot. I was reaching like millions of people. I still am, but um, that really pulled me in. And then I realized, like, so what? Like, who cares? I don't want this to be like all I think about, right? Because you can reach lots of people and still not have an impact. So what good is that? Like that's no fun either. So I
Mhm.
think just keeping it in perspective is the most important thing. But turn off those notifications. They are vile. They have to go. They're the devil.
I
Bad news.
know. My wife really wishes I would have sounds on. I don't have any sounds. I don't
Really.
have my
Yeah.
phone doesn't ring, text, no notifications,
Uh,
nothing. I go to my phone when I want to go to it. It doesn't call
mhm.
me in, but I do go
Yeah.
to it often, which is an issue. Sarah,
Mhm.
let's just say someone's been drawn into this episode with the title that probably has something about decluttering in it, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And they've hung with us this whole time, but they still are a bit overwhelmed and they are really hopeful or
Mhm.
wanting to get better. I'm going to give you just, whatever, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you'd like. I would like for you
Mhm.
to speak directly to that person that still feels as if they may not be able to do it. So,
Mm.
my last thing, if you could just speak to them and help someone who believes that they can't
Mm.
declutter their life.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I sometimes it is hard to believe that you could do it, right? But in that case, you could just borrow my belief because I have seen people who identify as hoarders, right? We had one woman who she had her bedroom was like full of boxes. And she was as overwhelmed as you could get, really. She went through and she would just do like an inch at a time, take a box, doing it, like sort through an inch. And she got through all of the boxes. The bedroom was cleared. And then she went on to the kitchen. She learned kitchen zero, right? So, I mean, of course it's overwhelming, right? I think sometimes we feel like I shouldn't be overwhelmed, but of course you're overwhelmed, right? If your house is full of stuff, you're gonna be overwhelmed. That makes perfect sense. It's not a surprise, right? When we realize, oh, this is a normal reaction to the situation, like we can relax, right? And if you are dealing with a lot of clutter, you don't if you knew how to fix it, you would have done it, right? Like so of course you don't know how to fix it, but I do, right? I do, and I have thousands of people are success stories. So just come on and let us help you. We will show you the way. We will give it to you step by step, right? You can't imagine like the whole journey. And also you don't have to. All you have to do is get started, right? I mean, that's kind of been a little bit of the theme today is, just do one thing and then do the next and then do the next. And eventually you will get there. Like you will, as long as you don't stop. That's the only prerequisite.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Sarah. What a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. Go check
Yeah.
out the Decluttering Club, especially if you believe it fits you. I think some people should go take a peek just at what you're doing in their business, even if they're a business person and want to see some cool stuff going on. Definitely if they believe they fit into that group that needs to
Mm,
declutter. Check it out at
you.
thedeclutteringclub.com. We're Seek Go Create. We've got new episodes every Monday. Thankful for people that are watching, commenting over on YouTube and listening in on all the platforms. Thank you for all that you are doing. We appreciate it. We'll see everyone next week.